Hello, all of you beautiful people, and welcome to the very first episode of Silver Screen Spotlight. I'm your humbly pretentious host, Tanner Rapal. Today we're going to be talking about Robert Vina's 1920 film, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. Dr. Caligari is widely regarded as one of the most iconic movies of the 20th century, as it was arguably the first film to truly incorporate many of the filmmaking and narrative techniques that would come to define not just the horror genre, but the industry as a whole. One of the first things to notice about this film is its striking, almost bizarre look, from its use of gorgeous sets that exaggerate reality to its highly stylized costuming and makeup. Nearly every technical element of this film is a marvel for its time. The movie was released in the midst of the German Expressionist movement, which put very simply began to focus on projecting atmospheric and emotional elements as an external reality, comparable to the objective reality seen in a lot of other motion pictures at the time. Whereas many films around this time period used the camera to capture the natural reality of the world, Dr. Caligari makes a point to heavily exaggerate the setting of Holstenwall. The sets are particularly eye-catching in this film, twisting and contorting in almost claustrophobic ways. The sharp, jagged edges as well as the elaborate paintings used as backdrops seen throughout Dr. Caligari creates an eerie atmosphere which makes the movie feel particularly off-putting and fantastical. It adds a dreamlike feel to the film that really wasn't seen in cinema in the early 1900s. Dr. Caligari is considered by audiences to be the first of many things, be it the first psychological thriller or even the first true horror film. However, what makes Caligari so timeless is that it isn't just a horror film. At its very core, it's also a mystery movie and would lay the groundwork for what would eventually become the noir genre. Caligari blends all of these elements of filmmaking together so well and in a way that has never been done before, and that's really why it's looked back on so fondly. Not only is it a massive technical milestone, but it challenged the idea of what you could do with the medium. Before we dive deeper into the impact of this film, let's discuss the plot. See, Caligari is divided into a 6-act structure, which in itself caused contention among the writing staff and production. The writers of Dr. Caligari, Hans Janowitz and Karl Mayer, claimed they wrote the film with a different structure, something that the director Robert Vina would change without notifying them in production. As you'll understand soon, this isn't merely a shift in narrative structure, but changes the message that the film was written to critique in the first place. The story of Dr. Caligari is told throughout 4 acts, with the first and the 6th functioning as a prelude and an epilogue to the story. Before diving into why the 6th act in particular is so widely debated among cinema fans and the people behind the movie, let's go over a quick overview of what happens in the film. Act 1 opens up and we meet our protagonist Francis along with his wife Jane. Francis explains to a man that they have lived through things that are stranger than anything he has ever been through, telling the story of how he first met the titular Dr. Caligari. We're then taken to the fictional German town of Holstenwall, where we see a fair has come to town. Dr. Caligari being one of the attractions at the showcase, as he has a somnambulist, or put more simply, a sleepwalker named Cesare. Dr. Caligari attempts to obtain a permit to open his own attraction from the town clerk, to which he is dismissed and treated like a nuisance. Once Dr. Caligari opens his stand, Act 1 ends. Act 2 begins with a mysterious death of the town clerk, stabbed in the side. It is described as the first in a series of mysterious crimes. We then follow 2 men, Alan and Francis, who are enjoying the fair before they pass by Dr. Caligari's tent, which he waves a massive crowd into, revealing Cesare to the public and exclaims that he will answer any question about the future. Alan, intrigued by this proposition, excitedly asks Cesare how long he'll live, to which he responds, "Until dawn." Understandably freaked out, Alan exits the tent with Francis before meeting with our lovely lead lady Jane. Here, we find out that they're both in love and are waiting for her to choose which one of them she likes more. Francis tells Alan, no matter who she chooses, let's remain friends. Yeah, good luck with that, buddy. We then follow Alan home, where a mysterious man breaks into his abode and stabs him, taking us to the end of Act 2. Act 3 begins and Francis learns of Alan's death, having been killed in the same way as a town clerk, and showing us that beautiful German expressionist silent film physical acting, before realizing that Cesare's prediction came true. After some running around, Francis and Jane's father obtain authorization to check out what's up with Cesare and see if Dr. Caligari is hiding any secrets. Just when they arrive and seem to be on the edge of discovering something big, they're called back away to the police station, as they've apprehended a man attempting to kill a woman, and the murders have allegedly been solved, signaling the end of Act 3. Act 4 begins and the man denies being the killer that they're looking for. And is that Hugh Jackman? No, sadly he does not have my glorious king's chiseled physique and rippling abs. However, he continues to deny any involvement with the murders. In search for her father, Jane finds her way back to the fairgrounds, where she runs into Dr. Caligari and comes face to face with Mr. Tim Burton himself, scaring her away. That night, Frances decides to spy on Caligari and Cesare, never seeing him leave the cabinet and watching the doctor sleep all night. In reality, Cesare had broken into Jane's house and taken her, running off into the night before he's chased down by the townsfolk, leaving Jane behind. Frances returns, frantically asking what happened. She explains Cesare kidnapped her, shocking Frances and taking us to the end of Act 4. Act 5 begins and we're almost done, I promise. Frances alerts the police, who seize the cabinet of Dr. Caligari and find a fake Cesare. Dr. Caligari gets spooked and manages to escape the police, running away as Frances gives chase. Frances chases him all the way to an insane asylum, where he runs inside, searching for the doctor before finding out that he's none other than the director of the hospital. Now here's where stuff starts to get crazy. We find out through the director's diary that he isn't the first Dr. Caligari. In fact, the original was the hypnotist who ventured through northern Italy in the 18th century, who had successfully placed a somnambulist under his control, commanding it to kill anyone he wished, exactly like our Caligari. The director became obsessed with the study of sleepwalkers, and once he finally had one admitted into the asylum, began his experiments and took on the mantle of Caligari, ending Act 5. Act 6 is easily the most confusing part of this story, so I'll try to be clear and concise here. The director is outed for being Dr. Caligari and is taken away by the asylum staff. We then return to the courtyard of the first act, where Frances is telling the man about his story, before we then cut back to the inside of the asylum. We find out that Frances, alongside both Jane and Cesare, are all patients of the mental institution, as he exclaims how the doctor is Caligari. The director, now much less grotesque, examines Frances, concluding that he is insane. Now, I know that was a lot, but it is essential to understanding what Caligari is at its core. Firstly, let's dive into the ending and explore why it was so contentious for the writers. Now, if you want to believe Han Janowitz and Karl Mayer, then they say that they wrote the structure of the film with only the 4 main acts in mind, excluding the prelude and the epilogue. But that just most likely isn't true. That being said, it seems very likely that they did not intend for the story to conclude with a twist ending. Now, the pair of writers wanted the story to be very overtly anti-authoritarian in the wake of post-World War I Germany. If you look back at the narrative in a way that was claimed to have been written initially, then it tells a much different story. One of a man who had fooled the public by hypnotizing and using his authority to blind them to the reality of the atrocities being committed in front of them. A cautionary tale about the corruption of power and a warning of believing everything told you by an authority at face value. A very important sentiment, especially because of what would happen in Germany not even 15 years later. While the ending is subversive and regarded as one of, if not the first twist endings in the movie, there is a case to be made that it undermines the overall message that is being presented throughout the film. That being said, it is an extremely effective conclusion to the story, and one that shocked audiences at its release and still does to this day. Which ending you prefer is up to interpretation, and there's no correct answer, but it makes the film that much more interesting to discuss and study. An essay I found to be incredibly interesting was a paper by Siegfried Krakauer entitled From Caligari to Hitler, which explores the themes of anti-authoritarianism through the film and the impact it had on the German public in much more thorough detail than I have time to go into here. A very watered down interpretation of his thoughts is that through the inclusion of the 6th act, that it takes the film from something revolutionary to something conformist, which doesn't challenge the perceptions of the German public at large. Instead of its more overtly revolutionary themes, the ending painting Frances as insane for questioning the authority of the director was much more digestible for audiences, especially in the aftermath of World War I. That being said, it also does keep its anti-authoritarian themes on full display throughout the bulk of the film, albeit portrayed as a fantasy which has allowed the German public to experience the revolutionary story, while also having the comfort of the twist ending. While Caligari itself is a great film, it's the cultural impact it left behind which makes it an incredibly important moment in cinema history. I would highly suggest watching this movie for yourself and forming your own opinions on it, because it is very much a product of its time, but one that I believe still holds up today. The last thing I want to discuss is the score. Dr. Caligari is a silent film, and as far as I've researched, there's no official score that has been preserved from 1920. It seems that many arrangements have been made since then, and that it poses a challenge to composers to write a piece that complements such an iconic film. With the dozens of free versions available on YouTube or other online streaming services, you'll find many scores that don't quite seem to fit, and from my experience, simply changing the arrangement you listen to will give you a whole new experience on watching the film. There's no correct arrangement or way to watch this movie, so explore the options that are out there and see how your viewing experience changes with different music. In conclusion, Dr. Caligari is a film that is rightfully regarded as a landmark in film history. From its revolutionary themes to groundbreaking style, it has influenced the medium of film in many ways that are still felt today.